happen if a year-old baby fell from a fourth-floor window onto the head of a burly truck driver standing on the sidewalk? It's practically certain that the truckman would be knocked unconscious. He might die of brain concussion or a broken neck. Even an innocent little baby can become a dangerous missile when its body weight is set into fast motion. You may feel as helpless as a year-old infant as far as fighting is concerned, but please remember, 1. You weigh more than a baby, and 2. You need not fall from a window to put your body weight into motion. You have weight, and you have the means of launching that weight into fast motion. Furthermore, you have explosive ingredients. You may not appear explosive. You may appear as harmless as a stick of dynamite, which children have been known to mistake for an oversized stick of taffy. You can launch your body weight into fast motion, and like dynamite, you can explode that hurtling weight against an opponent with a stunning, blasting effect known as follow-through. Incidentally, mention of the baby and explosives reminds me of what happened at Toledo on the afternoon of July 4th, 1919. Standing there that day under the blazing Ohio sun, I felt like a baby as I glanced across the ring and saw big Jess Willard shrug off his bathrobe in the opposite corner. Cowboy Jess was heavyweight champion of the world, and he was a giant. Moreover, he was a perfectly proportioned giant. He was every inch an athlete. He tapered down beautifully from derrick-like shoulders, and his muscles were so smooth you could scarcely see them rippling under his sun-tanned skin. He towered 6 feet, 6 inches and a quarter. He weighed 245 pounds. In comparison, I shaped up like an infant or a dwarf, although I nudged past 6 feet and scaled 180 pounds. My weight was announced as 187 pounds, but actually I registered only 180. As I looked across the ring at Willard, I said to myself, "Geez, what a mountain I've got to blast down this time." I knew about blasting about dynamite. I had learned about dynamite in the mines of Colorado, Utah, and Nevada, where I had worked off and on for about 6 years, and I knew plenty about dynamite and fighting. I had made a study of fistic dynamite since I was 7 years old. That was when I had my first fist fight with a boy about my own size in Manassas, Colorado. I was born at Manassas and spent my early years there. Before I fought Willard, my manager Jack, Doc Kearns, already had nicknamed me Jack the Giant Killer, because I had belted out such big fellows as Carl Morris and Fred Fulton. They were big men, all right, but neither had appeared such an awesome giant as Willard did that sweltering afternoon. I had trained for Willard at the Overland Club on Maumee Bay, an inlet of Lake Erie. Nearly every day Kearns and trainer Jimmy DeForest reported that I was shaping up much better than Willard. But when I saw big Jess across the ring, without an ounce of fat on his huge frame, I wondered if Kearns and DeForest had been bringing me pleasant but false reports to bolster my courage. I won't say I was scared as I gazed at Willard, but I'll admit I began to wonder if I packed enough dynamite to blast the Man Mountain down. Since this is not a story of my life, I'll refrain from boring you with details of the fight. I'll wrap it up in a hurry. I'll merely recall that I sent Jess crashing to the canvas 6 or 7 times in the first round and gave him such a battering in the third session that Jess was unable to come out for the fourth round. As Willard sat helplessly on his stool in the corner, his handlers threw in the towel just after the bell had rung to start the fourth. I won the World Heavyweight Championship on a technical knockout. I won the ring's most coveted title by stopping a man much larger and stronger than I was, one who outweighed me 65 pounds. I blasted him into helplessness by exploding my fast-moving body weight against him. I used body weight, with which the falling baby could knock out the truck driver, and I used explosion. Exploding body weight is the most important weapon in fistfighting or in boxing. Never forget that. I was at my peak as a fighter the day I met Willard under the broiling Toledo sun. My body weight was moving like lightning, and I was exploding that weight terrifically against the giant. Even before the first round was finished, Willard looked like the victim of a premature mind blast. Number 2. Good and bad Toledo aftermaths. The explosives I displayed against Willard were harnessed soon by promoter Tex Rickard to produce 5 gates of more than $1,000 each. Those receipts were genuinely remarkable. For when Willard and I drew $452,224 at Toledo, that was the largest fight gate on record. My 5 big money bouts were with Georges Carpentier of France, Luis Angel Firpo of Argentina, Jack Sharkey of Boston, and Gene Tunney of New York, too. Because I was a good puncher, and because each opponent in those big gate fights was a hard hitter, the tremendous publicity given those extravaganzas made the world more punch-conscious than ever before. Incidentally, don't let anyone tell you Gene Tunney couldn't punch. Many fight fans have that wrong impression today. In our first bout at Philadelphia, where Gene wrested the title from me, he landed a right counter to the head that staggered me early in the first round. I didn't recover fully from that punch during the rest of the fight. And at Chicago, in our second scrap, Gene drove me to one knee with a head blow in the 8th round. Mind you, that was after I'd floored him for the long count in the 7th. Indeed, I found Gentleman Gene surprisingly explosive. Since those golden Rickard Dempsey days, the public's worship of punch has become more intense, for interest in the Kaio sock has been stimulated increasingly by press, radio, and television. And that intense public interest in punch has been one admirable aftermath of the blasting in Toledo. In addition, those big gates gave lads everywhere the desire to become good punchers, so that they, too, might hammer out riches with their fists. Those two effects, public worship of punch and youngsters' desire to hit hard, would have had a most beneficial influence upon the science of self-defense, were it not for an unexpectedly blighting development. Unfortunately, my big gates did more to commercialize fighting than anything else in pugilistic history. They transformed boxing into a big-time business. As a commercial enterprise, the fight game began attracting people who knew little or nothing about self-defense. Hoping to make quick money, they flocked into boxing from other fields. They came as promoters, managers, trainers, and even instructors. Too often they were able to crowd out old-timers because they had money to invest, because they were better businessmen, or merely because they were glib-talking hustlers. They joined the gold rush in droves: dentists, doctors, lawyers, restaurant proprietors, clothing manufacturers, butchers, grocers, bookies, racket guys, and pool hall hangers-on. Fellows who never tossed a fist in their lives became trainers. They mistaught boys in gymnasiums. Those mistaught youths became would-be fighters for a while, and when they hung up their gloves, they too became instructors. It was only natural that the tide of palooka experts should sweep into the amateur ranks, where lack of knowledge among instructors today is as pathetic as among professional handlers. And that's not the worst. Too many amateur instructors have forgotten entirely that the purpose of boxing lessons is to teach a fellow to defend himself with his fists, not to point him toward amateur or professional competition with boxing gloves. To a menacing extent, the major purpose of fistic instruction has been bypassed by amateur tutors who try to benefit themselves financially, indirectly or directly, by producing punchless performers who can win amateur or professional bouts on points. Not one youth in 50 has any ambitions to become a professional fighter when he first goes to an instructor. That's particularly true among college and high school lads. Yet the instructors continue teaching boys to become smart boxers instead of well-rounded fighters. And that's a downright shame, for punch is absolutely essential in fist fighting, and it's an invaluable asset in amateur or professional boxing. Actually, it's stupid, instead of smart instruction, to teach other fighting movements to a boy before he has been taught to punch. Because of this commercial, win on a point as soon as possible attitude among modern instructors, the amateur and professional ranks today are cluttered with futile club fighters and fancy dans. In the professional game, there are so few genuine fighters that promoters find it almost impossible to make enough attractive matches to fill their boxing dates. At this writing, lack of worthwhile talent in the heavyweight division is particularly appalling. It's almost unbelievable that the heavy division should have declined so far since the days when I was fighting my way up in 1917, 1918, and 1919. The class was jammed with good men then. Jess Willard was champion. On his trail were Carl Morris, Frank Moran, Bill Brennan, Billy Miskey, Fred Fulton, Homer Smith, Gunboat Smith, Jim Flynn, and Porky Flynn. And there were Sam Langford, Harry Wills, Tommy Gibbons, and Willie Meehan. With the exception of Fat Meehan, any one of those top fighters could knock your brains out if you made a mistake while facing him. Meehan, although a slapper, threw so much leather and was so rugged that he and I broke even in our 3-4 round bouts. I won, we drew, and I lost. Lack of top-notchers in the heavy division, and in most other divisions today, reflects the scarcity of good instructors and trainers everywhere. There are a few good ones lingering on, but they are notable exceptions. Joe Louis found a good instructor when he was about 16. He found Atler Ellis at the Brewster Center in Detroit. Ellis, an old-time fighter, taught Joe how to punch and how to box. And when Joe turned professional, he went immediately under the wing of the late Jack Blackburn, grand old-time fighter and one of the finest trainers the ring ever produced. Joe developed into an accurate, explosive sharpshooter who could take you out with either fist. He was a great champion. Punchers are made, not born. Louis retired as undefeated heavyweight champion in 1949, and I'll bet that as he retired, Joe considered himself a natural-born puncher.